And so, it continues. Hello there! Welcome back to Max's Writing Advice Q&A! In tonight's episode, I've got a selection of questions sent by viewers just like you and picked through a random number generator. Nailed it on the first take. Every week, I pick your questions, so if you have a question you would like me to answer in a future video, please let me know. Your question, the one you may or may not be about to leave, is as likely to be picked as anyone else's. Before I go on anywhere though, allow me to give you the formal disclaimer as always that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Am I going to break out into like a news person voice? Maybe. Who is that mysterious masked man? Anyhow, again, I'm a pretty silly person and the following is merely just that. My advice. The advice of a silly person who happens to run a YouTube channel about writing advice, but that's besides the point. Alright, we got ourselves a really nice and simple first question. A bit of a follow-up to the general advice that I like to give people. The question goes a little bit like this. Hey Max, how do we get past that if someone really has told us we can't write a story just about X or about Y? In the past, I've given the advice, in case you're wondering what this question is about, that especially for my guide for how to plan a novel, it's literally the main video on my channel. Go check it out if you haven't. It's a 1-hour workshop where I go through my the 5th or 6th version on my novel planning guide. It is the most updated version. Go give it a watch. But I talk about the idea there of finding a story that excites you, even if it's about something that people can tell you that you can't just write a story about this, like as though the implication that a story needs more. And of course that's entirely silly, because you can indeed just write a story about X or Y. You can just have that story be about the things that excite you, is fine. But even so, even through all these things, people emerge into the foreground and ask you and say things such as, you can't write a story about X and Y, or you can't write a story in that tense, or you can't write a story from that point of view, or with that many points of view, or with only one point of view. And you know what I say to all of those people? To all of those metaphorical people who have stepped into the foreground and are here to tell you that you can't have fun? Write it anyway. Just do it. Just freaking do it. The thing is this, as I've said before, and I'm gonna say it one more time, there are no rules to writing. Zero. Anyone out there who sells their opinion as hard rules, do this or you're going to fail, is absolutely overselling their opinion. They are overselling their opinion a little bit. Again, there are no hard rules here. There are just opinions, points of view. Some opinions may be a little bit more informed than others, such as the opinions of the writers that you look forward to, the writers that you enjoy. I like to uphold the opinion of Stephen King from his memoir/writing advice book on writing. I love that book. I agree with pretty much everything he says, but even then I understand that that's just his opinion. He didn't just come upon golden rules. What? Written on what? Hardbacks? What am I imagining here? But he didn't just find these tablet / hardback books with the rules on them. No, he found them through trial and error, through real life. Everyone finds their own points of view and opinions. But they're ultimately just that, opinions. And opinions are real easy to come by. Everyone's got enough to spare. So honestly, it's your time, your effort, your writing, make it about whatever you want it to be. Seriously. And if anybody out there is going to tell you that, oh, if you make a story about this, no one's going to like it, no one's going to read it, you're never going to make any money off of it, that's a lie, of course, because it's, again, just their opinion. And I can assure you that if you have fun doing something and you put it out into the world, someone else is going to like it. I can assure you of that, no question about it at all. As a little bit of an extra side note before we move on anywhere else, I want to say that for particular scenarios, such as someone telling you that, hey, writerly person, you can't have the main story be about queer characters. You can't have the main character be trans. You can't have the main character be ace. If anyone tells you that, you have my absolute permission to look at them and tell them to go to hell, because they are wrong. And now, for the next question. Oh yeah, it's a technical question. I love this one. It goes a little bit like this. After having someone speak, are you supposed to capitalize the next word? I've seen both ways used and haven't been told if one way is correct. Example, open quotations, hello, comma, close quotations, he greeted. Or, open quotations, hello, comma, close quotations, capital H-E, greeted. That wasn't the best way of reading that out loud, but I didn't realize that I would have to read it. But anyhow, technical questions! This is always fun, mostly because this deals with the grammar of language, and you may be thinking to yourselves, Max, these are the rules of writing. They're the building blocks of language. I don't think there are rules. But most importantly, the following advice is relevant to me living in the United States of America and speaking American English. Does it even have a name? Because like Spanish in Mexico is called Castellano, so I'm just like, is there a name for the dialect spoken in America? Damn right, it's American. That's what we're... So the following advice is relevant to American. So if you write in American, here's how it goes. That's just ridiculous. Am I gonna do a second take of that line? Probably not, because that's just hilarious, as I was completely seriously saying. What are quotation marks? Quotation marks are kind of like parentheses in which they encapsulate a statement or a set of words to indicate to the reader something. In this particular case, when it comes to fiction, is to indicate that someone is talking. That being said though, quotation marks are not punctuation. That is to say that in the particular example that you mentioned, the statement that is encapsulated within the quotation marks ends with a comma. That means that the sentence has not ended. It is merely moving on to the remainder of the sentence, in which case, in this particular case though, it is a dialogue tag with the words he greeted. The entire sentence is the dialogue, the comma, and then the following dialogue tag. These two are basically part of the one same sentence. My general advice basically is to pretend that the quotation marks are not there. If you look at the statements that you put up forward before, it is clear that the first one is correct because the comma indicates that the sentence is moving on. So you don't have to capitalize he. To wrap it up in a little bit more of an eloquent way, if a piece of dialogue, a segment or a line of dialogue ends with a comma, it is not the end of the sentence, and thus whatever follows, unless it's a character name, needs not be capitalized. I want you to please keep in mind that not all lines of dialogue are going to end with commas. If you have a line of dialogue that ends with a period, so for instance, hello, period, the following line is a brand new sentence and thus needs to be capitalized. The first letter needs to be capitalized. And I'm ready for people from other countries to tell me that that's not how it works over there, but this is how we do it in America. And for the final question of today's video, it goes a little bit, or rather precisely like this. Any advice for getting back into writing in a more narrative style after writing in a different format for so long? I am going to assume that what you mean by this is that you have been writing for a long time in a different format, such as journalism or blogging. Am I right? Or writing manuals, stuff, technical writing, something that is not narrative or storytelling. And to move on from one of those to a more narrative style of writing is actually incredibly simple. My advice is to just sit down and write. Imagine, for instance, that someone has been practicing a style of martial arts for a long time. Let's call it judo. And this person wants to get into another style of martial arts, let's say taekwondo. These martial arts styles share similarities, such as a necessity for physical prowess, but they're not the same. Different styles, different ways to go about doing things. Does the person who likes judo needs preparation to start doing taekwondo? Not really. This person just needs to start doing it. Just like writing journalism and going into writing storytelling, or doing judo and starting taekwondo, some of your skills will translate, because just like physical prowess will make it easier for you to do a different martial art, your ability to relay your thoughts into words on the page or the screen will make it easier for you to write. Like, you don't have to start, trust me, you're not starting from zero. You're actually starting pretty far ahead. You just have to translate your skills into this new medium that you're working on. Because again, writing is just like any other discipline. You get better the more you work on it, the more you do it, the more you practice. Now I'm not gonna lie to you, it is gonna be a little bit of a hard transition to move from, writing technical manuals to going into a more storytelling medium of doing writing. But I have a tip for you. Something for you to keep in mind when you jump into writing, okay? Remember that writing for this particular form is storytelling. And when you sit down to do this, you are a storyteller. You are not writing up an article, you're not making a blog post, you're not writing up a tech manual, you're telling a story. It's no different than 10,000 years ago when people were sharing stories around the campfire. You are a storyteller. Your job is not to give us a report or to relay information. It is to entertain the reader. So when you sit down to write, get inside that mindset. You are a storyteller, and your job is to entertain whoever is reading your story. I've given this piece of advice in the past when regarding how do you start stories? How do you just write the first line? And more often than not, my general advice is to just get into that mood. Pretend that you're writing to someone as though you're telling them the story who's sitting across from you on the other side of the desk or table. Imagine them and ask yourself, how would I start telling this story to this person? And you move on from there. You're a storyteller and you have experience, and trust me, a lot of your writing skills will translate into writing narrative stories, but it's ultimately gonna be about jumping in and writing, okay? Okay. And that's about it for today's questions. I hope that you enjoyed what I had to say, or at least I gave you another point of view. If you have your own point of view you would like to share with me and the rest of us, feel free to go down into the comments down below and letting us know, as well as submitting your questions for future videos. But again, I gotta get going. I wanna thank you for watching, thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll see you on the next one.